So today I thought I would just bring in a couple of the subjects that we've been discussing recently in these car videos, um, kind of bring them together in a very relevant way. Um, and this involves basically like a technique that I think, if it fits your sensibility, is a very effective technique or way to approach a lot of these manifesting ideas. Um, and it's spoken about a lot by Richard Dotz. Um, and it also ties into, we were talking about reality transurfing the other day by Vadim Zayland. And it ties into something that he says in that book, as I mentioned in that transurfing video that I recently did. Um, I've been listening to some of the audiobook version of that book because I find it, again, relatively easy and enjoyable to listen to. It's such a huge book. I don't know if I'd ever want to read that book again. Just actually read even a large part of it because it's just enormous. It's very big, but I find it easy listening to. And anyway, in that same chapter, as we were talking, as I quoted the other day, um, he talks about war and how there's this pendulum. If you're familiar with that book at all, you know about pendulums, and how there's people who are advocating going to war, and then there's people who are strongly anti-war. Um, and he was saying that, like, on an energetic level, the people who are anti-war, in a strange way, a perverse way, actually fuel the war occurring, happening, because there's so much anti-war sentiment and animosity, and there's also all this pro-war sentiment, and those two things just, they bring energy to each other, and the war perpetuates because of that. This is generally speaking. Okay. um and anyway, that I just thought was an interesting and really good example. And, like, I remember, like, I've always been I'm strongly anti-war. Um, and I always have been since I was like a teenager. But I remembered, like, when I started to get like a slightly politically active when I was like my later teenage years, and maybe up until even my early 20s a little bit. You'd go to like these anti-war, anti whatever, uh, anti-military type stuff. You go to these rallies or get involved with these groups, and I, like, so often I was like, this is like a really weird vibe, because I was still into a bunch, spiritual ideas at the time, and kind of like into this more like like just vibey spiritual stuff. I wasn't into LOA stuff yet, but I was into vibey spiritual stuff already, and I was like, so many of these anti-war people and these groups, like, they have a weird vibe. Like, it's not a spiritual vibe. Um, and I think a reason for that is because of what Zaylen said. Like, you get into this group setting that's anti something, and it actually often seems to bring energy to what they don't want. And in reality transurfing, he says, you know, this war thing, this pro-war or anti-war, he goes, the practical solution is adopting a neutral stance. And he says, obviously, that can be very hard to do, right? And there's plenty of situations where that seems impossible to do. But Zaylen says, nonetheless, like, there's always countries that are just remain neutral and are neutral. An obvious example is like Switzerland, right? Like a neutral country. And, that neutrality is a powerful ally for you. That's very powerful, remaining neutral. Um, and again, there's a lot to unpack there when it comes to something as, tragic and awful as war. But I thought that was a really good point about like just neutral countries, like countries that are like, we're just not getting involved. We're not taking a stand one way or another for this country or this. When a war happens and two countries are going against each other, if you take a neutral stand, it's like, well, I'm not going to take a stand for this country or for that country. I'm neutral. And this pertains directly to our lives, obviously, on an individual basis, how we react to things. And when we're so pro something or, pro a feeling and anti another feeling, or pro, something we want and very much anti against like not having what we want. We create these pendulums that then keep us stuck in what we actually do not desire. While if we're more neutral about it, our life tends to smooth out, generally speaking. It's not to say there won't be plenty of bumps, but it tends to smooth out. And the things that we need and the things we desire tend to come to us more easily, more smoothly. And this is where, a lot of Richard Dott's work is really useful. I'll put a link above. We made several podcast episodes and, car videos about Richard's approach. I'll put a link above to one of those podcast episodes. But something that Dots recommends, and like a way to bring this neutrality that, is spoken about a fair amount in reality transurfing, a way to bring this neutrality into your day-to-day life and feel less overwhelmed by not wanting something or wanting something, and just being more calmly neutral, is what Dots often talks about, where he says you can just, carve out 5, 10, 15 minutes. I'd recommend, if you have trouble doing this, just starting with 5 minutes. He said, carve out 5 minutes like 3 times a day. And just get your body comfortable. Sit in a comfortable chair or on your couch. You can even lie down if you feel like it won't make you too drowsy. Get your body comfortable. And then just kind of be there. Don't do anything. Don't try to do anything. Just relax. And of course, this ties directly into what I talk about in The Joy of Not Thinking, when I talk about vibing out, as a meditational exercise. But if you spend 5 or 10 minutes, or 15 minutes if you want, you can spend longer. But again, if you want to start by just spending 5 minutes and you just are there and you notice all the crazy thoughts going by and you notice all the crazy feelings going by and you don't react, you're like, all right, this is happening right now, but I'm just here. And if you want to, you can think about something that you value deeply. That can simply be God, or it can be something like peace or prosperity or health. You can consider that, think about that, but really the point is you're just there and you're watching these feelings, watching these thoughts, and you're just there. Particularly if you do this for a longer time than just 5 minutes. And I think 5 minutes is a fine starting point if you just want to start there. But I encourage you to stretch this out to 10 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time, and do it a couple times a day. If this idea resonates with you. If you do that, you'll notice, first of all, that you're okay right now. You're here. You're okay. You'll notice that what you deeply value, whether it's like this, like God, right, or something like peace or health or prosperity, whatever, what you deeply value is also, in a strange way, here right now, and that all the thoughts and feelings, all that crazy stuff, your head buzzing, um, it's okay. It doesn't mean that God's not here, or that health's not here, or that peace is not here, or that prosperity is not here. And of course, this probably sounds a lot like the success indicator of W. Clement Stone as well. All these things are tied together. But what I really want to emphasize here, and what, dots, I think sometimes makes it sound like when you do this type of exercise, a little bit too ethereal. It's like, you'll go into this infinite space and just, be totally at peace. And what I've found in my own life, and also just working with people, is it's often not like that. It's like my head's still racing, or my body still feels really weird, or I'm still thinking about something that bothers me. But I don't let that affect the fact that I'm here right now, and I'm just sitting, breathing, observing what's going on for the next 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm not reacting strongly to any of it. And if I don't react strongly to any of it for 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, something's going to happen. And if I do that 2 or 3 times a day, it's going to become habitual. And my reactivity to all the bullshit that I think and feel throughout the day is going to become less and less. Going to affect me less. So for me, it's not this ethereal or, ecstatic practice when I do this consistently a couple times a day. But it's very grounding in the best sense, and in the, I guess you could say, in the most peaceful sense. But it's peaceful in a very non-special way. And I've been experiencing this in my own life recently, just the last couple days, because I've really gotten away from doing a longer, I guess you could call this like a meditational or just like a grounding exercise at night. I've gotten away since my second child was born, like a year ago, from really doing any like, lengthy evening routine because I'm just tired, and I might spend a couple minutes doing something and then I zonk out. But I've made a concerted effort the last couple of days to just spend 15 minutes at night, shortly before I go to bed or right before I go to bed. I have a light on, I have a lamp on, I sit on the couch. So, because if I lie down, I'm going to perhaps fall asleep, right? So I sit on the couch, I keep my eyes open. Maybe I like just get in touch really quickly with like peace or God or, whatever you want to say, right? But just sit on the couch with my eyes open, and I just am there. And I make myself sit there and just be there for 15 minutes. And the last couple nights doing this, just doing that, the amount of grounding that does for me compared to just, maybe looking at a couple of statements or affirmations before I go to bed and trying to feel them for a minute or two. That short minute or two exercise is much less grounding and peaceful, generally speaking, than spending 15 minutes just sitting there and being okay sitting there with my eyes open, the light on, not thinking about anything particular. So all this stuff ties in. And this is a very practical way to utilize these principles and to utilize a lot of the stuff that Dots talks about and that Zalen talks about in reality transurfing. Becoming more neutral and feeling better by being more neutral, more peaceful, more in flow. A lot of the time it's not about trying to manifest something. It's about being at peace with what's going on right now, being more neutral in the best sense. And you can play with doing this exercise a couple times a day. Like I said, you could start out just doing it like, in the morning for about 5 minutes, middle of the day, sometime during the day for 5 minutes, and like in the evening for 5 minutes. But then feel free to stretch it out maybe once a day, like you do, for instance, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the middle of the day, and then 15 minutes at night, for instance. Or if you have time and are motivated to do it, do 10 or 15 minutes 3 times a day. Or you could do 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, like maybe twice a day or something like that. There's different ways to experiment with it, but really good in my experiences whenever I've done this. And like I said, I've gotten away from just kind of like being there in this sense, like multiple times a day the last year, and I'm getting back into it, and I'm already seeing just more groundedness in my life the last couple of days by doing that. If you have any questions or would like counseling on this subject, feel free to reach me at radicalcounselor.com. Until next time.